The phone vibrated once against the mahogany desk. Damien Voss did not usually look at unknown numbers. Unknown numbers were for other people. He was in the middle of a meeting. 3 lieutenants sat across from him, suits dark, eyes alert, the low hum of the city bleeding through the tinted windows behind his back. A glass of untouched water sweated onto a leather coaster. The air smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne. The phone vibrated again. He glanced down. Unknown caller. He almost let it die. Instead, he answered. The screen filled with a small face. Dark curls. A plastic barrette sliding sideways like it had lost its grip. Round cheeks wet with tears. Eyes so dark they looked almost black. His eyes. "Is this Daddy?" The words were soft, uncertain. They hit him, like a fist to the sternum. Damien went completely still. He had once held a rival crime lord at gunpoint, without his pulse climbing. He had negotiated hostile takeovers while men threatened his life. He had never gone the color of chalk. Across the desk, his lieutenants saw it happen. "Is this Daddy?" the little girl asked again, quieter now, as if she was afraid the answer might be no. Behind her, in the background of a cramped apartment with peeling paint and thin curtains, 2 large men in leather jackets crowded a woman near the kitchen counter. One pointed a finger inches from her face. The other had his hand wrapped around her arm. The woman was not looking at them. She was looking at the phone. At him. 4 years. That was how long Nadia Reeves had been gone. 4 years of dead ends and sealed doors. 4 years of searching without admitting he was searching. 4 years of a silence that had felt engineered. And the child on the screen looked 3. The math was not complicated. "Mister," the girl whispered. Her lower lip trembled. "They're being mean to Mama." The temperature in the office dropped. Damien set down his pen. He did not raise his voice. He did not gesture. He simply looked at the 3 men across from him. The room emptied in under 10 seconds. The door shut with a soft click. Silence. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, bringing his face closer to the screen. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet in the way that made grown men reconsider their choices. "What's your name?" "Ava." He repeated it once, under his breath. "Ava." He let the word settle. "Ava, I need you to turn the phone around and show me the men." She obeyed immediately, gripping the phone in both hands like it might escape. The image swung. 3 clear seconds. Leather jackets, cheap cologne, a manila folder tucked under one arm, a logo printed on the corner. Damien recognized the agency at once. He knew the kind of loans they collected. He knew the kind of pressure they applied. He also saw Nadia, her Diener uniform still on, hair pulled back tight, one loose strand falling across her cheek. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. Hollowed out, running on empty for too long. Her knuckles were white around a folded paper. She had seen Ava with the phone. Her eyes lifted to the screen. For one long moment, 4 years collapsed into the width of a cracked display. Damien's jaw tightened. "Gentlemen," he said conversationally, "you have 30 seconds to remove your hands from that woman and step outside. After that, I stop being polite." One of the collectors squinted at the phone. Recognition bloomed slow and ugly across his face. He knew that face. Everyone in that industry did. "Sir, we're just here to collect on a legitimate 20 seconds, Damien replied. The man's hand dropped from Nadia's arm. They left without another word. The apartment fell silent. Ava turned the phone back around. Her eyes were still red, but steady now. "They're gone," she reported. "Good girl," Damien said. And then, because she had asked him a question and deserved an answer, he added, "Ava, I'm going to come there. Don't let anyone in until I arrive." She considered that with the gravity of someone making a very large decision. Then she nodded. "Okay, Daddy." The word landed differently this time. Not a question, a decision. Behind her, Nadia stood frozen in the middle of the room, arms wrapped around herself like she was bracing for impact that hadn't arrived yet. Damien watched her carefully. He did not say her name. Not yet. He ended the call. For a long moment, he remained seated. The office felt smaller. On his desk lay contracts worth millions. A city that moved when he moved. An empire built on precision and control. And somewhere across town, in a one-room apartment with a sideways barrette and a rubber band around the refrigerator handle, there was a child with his eyes who had decided he was her father. Damien rose to his feet. He picked up his jacket. He did not call for his driver. He did not announce where he was going. As he walked toward the elevator, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. In the mirrored doors, he caught his own reflection, the tattoos along his neck, the controlled expression, the reputation that cleared rooms. For the first time in years, something in that reflection had cracked. Not weakness. Something else. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. Damien stepped inside. Somewhere behind him, a meeting agenda lay unfinished on a mahogany desk. Somewhere ahead of him, a 3-year-old girl with a crooked barrette was waiting by a door she had been told not to open. And for the first time in 4 years, Damien Voss was no longer searching in the dark. He was going home. The elevator doors closed with a muted slide, sealing Damien inside a narrow box of mirrored steel and fluorescent light. The city moved somewhere below him, distant and irrelevant. He stared at his reflection. His pulse was steady. That annoyed him. The call replayed in precise fragments. Ava's voice, the barrette slipping sideways, Nadia's eyes lifting toward the screen. 4 years. 3 years old. The numbers aligned with brutal clarity. The phone in his hand felt heavier than it should have. He stepped out into the underground garage, the air cooler, laced with oil and concrete dust. His car waited in its usual spot, black paint absorbing the dim light. He slid into the driver's seat himself. No chauffeur. No witnesses to whatever this was. The engine turned over with a low growl. As he pulled out onto the street, traffic lights flickered red to green in obedient sequence. He drove without conscious thought, muscle memory guiding him through lanes and turns. His mind was elsewhere. He saw it again. The logo. Not just the brand, the placement. Upper right corner. A habit specific to that company's field packets. He knew their model. High-interest emergency loans. Compounding penalties. They targeted the exhausted. The alone. The ones too overwhelmed to read the fine print twice. He knew something else. They did not act alone. The forged letter Nadia had once received, he did not have it yet, but he felt it like a splinter under skin had removed her from his life at a precise moment. A surgical cut. Someone had wanted her gone, and someone had known enough to make it believable. Damien already knew who forged the letter. He just hadn't said the name yet. He did not allow the thought to fully form. Not in the car. Not while driving. Instead, he dialed. Cole. A single ring. "I need a car outside a building on Garfield Street," Damien said. 2 men just left. Leather jackets. Debt collection. "I want faces, plates, everything. Quiet." "Yes, sir." And Cole, a pause. "Do not touch them." Silence on the other end. Surprise contained, not voiced. "Yes, sir." Damien ended the call. The city thinned as he moved east. Storefronts gave way to older brick buildings, windows patched with mismatched curtains. The air shifted. Less glass. More laundry detergent and fried oil drifting through open vents. He parked a block away. He preferred to approach on foot. The building was exactly what the camera had suggested. 3 floors. Faded numbers screwed unevenly beside the door. A cracked step. The faint smell of damp carpet leaking into the stairwell. He climbed. Each step creaked under his weight. 3rd floor. He stopped outside the door and listened. Nothing. Not silence. Born of emptiness. Silence held tight. The kind that breathes. He knocked twice. Not loud. Not aggressive. Knuckles against wood. A pause. He could almost feel her on the other side. Standing still. Counting breaths. "Nadia," he said evenly. "You don't have to open it. But I'm not leaving." The lock turned after a long moment. The door opened 4 inches. She looked at him through the gap. Exhaustion sharpened her features. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in the same tight style from the call, but loose strands had escaped. She looked smaller than he remembered. "You need to go," she said. "She called me." That flicker crossed her face again. Pain. Calculation. Something old and unfinished. "That means something," he added. The gap widened. He stepped inside. The apartment was smaller than it had appeared on screen. The air carried the faint scent of dish soap and something sweet syrup, maybe. The couch was unfolded into a bed, a thin blanket tucked with deliberate care. A plastic storage bin doubled as a television stand. A rubber band looped around the refrigerator handle to keep it shut. Damien absorbed everything without turning his head too obviously. Ava stood near the couch, clutching a stuffed rabbit. She watched him like she was studying a rare animal. He crouched slightly to her level. "Hi, Ava." She considered him. "You're the big man," she said. He almost smiled. "That's one name for me." She accepted this. Nadia closed the door quietly behind him. "Why are you here?" she asked. He straightened. "Because someone sent you something 4 years ago," he said. "And I need to see it." Her shoulders stiffened. "You don't get to walk back in and ask for things." He didn't argue. He simply looked around the room once more. The stack of bills clipped together on the counter. The 2 eggs in the refrigerator when she opened it to grab a glass of water. The way she poured from a bottle of milk nearly empty and didn't drink herself. The arithmetic of survival. "Those men," he said carefully. "They're not done." "I know." Her voice did not waver. He stepped closer to the counter, lowering his tone. "The interest rate they're charging is illegal in this state," he said. 9 points over cap, if it's who I think it is." She blinked. "How would you know that?" "I pay attention." He did not add that he also recognized intimidation patterns, that he knew federal violations when he saw them, that the man who had pointed at her had already stepped into 4 separate lines he was not legally allowed to cross. He turned slightly toward Ava. "You did the right thing calling," he told her. She nodded. Solemn. Nadia watched the exchange with guarded eyes. "You can't fix this," she said quietly. "You don't know what it's been." "Then tell me." Silence expanded between them. Finally, she moved to the cabinet above the stove. She reached to the very back and pulled down a shoebox. Damien felt something in his chest tighten. She opened it slowly. Inside lay a photograph, a folded letter, a torn piece of paper with a phone number written in careful ink. She set the letter on the table. He did not touch it yet. Instead, he looked at her. "Before I read that," he said, "I need you to know something." She waited. "I didn't write it." Her expression did not change. "You haven't even seen it." "I don't need to." The refrigerator hummed softly behind them. From the couch, Ava flipped a page in a board book, cardboard scraping lightly. Nadia slid the letter across the table. "Then prove it." Damien sat down. He picked up the envelope. The paper felt familiar beneath his fingers. Too familiar. And as he unfolded it, he already knew what he was about to find. Not because he remembered writing it, but because he remembered exactly who had access to everything required to forge it. The paper made a soft, dry sound as Damien unfolded it fully. He did not rush. He read every word once without expression, then again with precision. The letterhead bore his insignia. The address was correct. The formatting was exact. Whoever had written it understood structure, tone, cadence, clinical, detached, efficient, a personal indulgence, a professional liability. Relocate immediately. Cease all contact. Consequences if you do not comply. At the bottom, a signature nearly indistinguishable from his own. Nearly. The refrigerator hummed behind him. A car passed outside, tires hissing faintly on worn pavement. Ava's quiet breathing from the couch filled the spaces between. Damien held the paper up slightly, angling it toward the thin light from the kitchen window. The watermark surfaced faintly in the cream stock. His jaw tightened by a fraction. He set the letter down carefully on the small table between them. "I didn't write this," he said. Nadia leaned against the counter, arms folded, posture defensive, but no longer shaking. "That's what you're supposed to say." "Yes." He met her gaze. "And I understand why you think I did." Silence stretched. The air in the apartment felt thinner now, charged with something less volatile than anger, but heavier than doubt. He tapped the bottom of the page lightly with one finger. "This signature is wrong." Her eyes flicked down, then back to him. "It looks exactly like yours." "Not exactly." He traced the air just above the ink without touching it. "The right stroke on the V is longer than the left when I sign my name. Always. It's muscle memory." He paused. "This one reverses it." Nadia said nothing. He continued, quieter. "Someone practiced. Enough to fool someone who didn't sign my name every day." The small kitchen clock ticked audibly now, as if time had decided to reassert itself. Nadia pushed off the counter slowly and moved closer to the table. She studied the page again, more carefully this time. "I was pregnant," she said, almost absently. "I wasn't analyzing pen strokes." He felt that land. "I know." She looked up sharply at that. "No," she corrected. "You don't." The words were not shouted. They didn't need to be. Damien inclined his head slightly. Not in agreement, in acknowledgement. "You're right," he said. "I don't know what those months looked like." Ava shifted on the couch, the springs creaking softly. She was listening without appearing to listen, her rabbit tucked under one arm, eyes flicking between them. Nadia pulled out the torn slip of paper from the box and placed it beside the letter. A phone number, ink slightly faded. "He delivered it in person," she said. "Said he was from your office. He knew details, things about you, about us." Damien's gaze sharpened. "Describe him." She closed her eyes briefly, summoning memory. Mid-30s, clean cut, expensive watch, confident, but not loud. "He didn't threaten me. He didn't need to." Damien did not move. "Did he give a name?" "No." "Accent?" "Local." She opened her eyes. "He told me it was for my safety, that you were protecting me." The room seemed to contract slightly around those words. Damien's fingers rested flat on the table now, still, controlled. "The paper," he said after a moment, almost to himself. "This stock was discontinued 2 years ago." Nadia blinked. "How would you know that?" "I approve supply orders." He turned the page over once more, studying the texture. "It came from my personal office cabinet. Only 3 people had access." He did not say the names aloud. Not yet. Nadia watched him carefully. She was looking for something arrogance, denial, manipulation. Instead, she saw calculation. "You're certain?" she said. "Yes." Her posture shifted slightly. the first subtle crack in a wall, built out of exhaustion and survival. Ava slid off the couch quietly and padded across the linoleum floor in socked feet. She climbed into the empty chair beside Damien without asking permission. The chair wobbled slightly under the added weight. He glanced down at her. She opened her board book in her lap and began turning pages, leaning gently against his arm as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Damien did not pull away. Nadia watched that too. "You said 3 people," she prompted. "My assistant. My attorney." He paused. "And my chief lieutenant." She held his gaze. "Which one would benefit from me disappearing?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he stood and moved slowly through the apartment, absorbing it fully now without disguise. The mismatched chairs, the plastic bin television stand, the rubber band on the refrigerator, the clipped stack of overdue notices on the counter. He stopped in front of the crayon drawings taped carefully along the wall. Houses, a sun, a dog, a figure with dark hair and broad shoulders drawn in thick lines. He looked at it longer than the others. Behind him, Nadia spoke again. "The loan," she said. "I took 8,000 at first, for hospital bills." He did not turn around. "And it grew," she continued. "Fees, interest, penalties. They call it compounding." He nodded once. "Did they provide written validation of the debt when they came today?" She frowned slightly. "No." "Did they threaten legal action verbally?" "They implied it." "Did they touch you?" "A beat." "Yes." His jaw tightened again. "Barely perceptible." "Then they violated federal law," he said evenly. Nadia stared at him. "I looked up my rights once," she admitted quietly. "At the library. But knowing and enforcing are different things." "Yes," he agreed. "They are." He turned back toward her. "You were isolated first," he said. "Then targeted." The words were clinical, but not cold. "You think this is connected?" she said. "I don't think coincidence scales this precisely." The clock ticked again. From the chair, Ava reached up and traced one of the tattoos on his hand with careful curiosity. "What's this?" she asked. "A mistake," he replied lightly. She studied it. "Looks like a drawing." He allowed the corner of his mouth to shift. "Sometimes I forget to use paper." Ava considered that deeply. Then she laughed. It was sudden and bright and entirely unguarded. The sound changed the room. Nadia's breath caught softly. Damien looked down at the child leaning against him, laughing at something absurd, unaware of forged letters and predatory interest rates and men who thought intimidation was a profession. He looked back up at Nadia. "I'm not asking you to trust me tonight," he said, "but I am asking you to let me investigate." Her eyes searched his face. "And if it's who you think it is?" His answer came without hesitation. "Then I correct it. Not loudly, not theatrically, just a statement of function." The hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet that followed. Outside, a siren wailed faintly somewhere far away. Inside, in a one-room apartment that smelled faintly of syrup and survival, the foundation of something long fractured, shifted by a single degree. Not repaired, but no longer frozen in place. Damien did not take the letter with him when he left that night. He memorized it instead. Every line, every margin, the faint indentation where the pen had pressed harder on certain words, the specific weight of the paper between his fingers, the watermark barely visible under kitchen light. He left the apartment with the image imprinted behind his eyes. The stairwell smelled of old carpet and detergent. His footsteps echoed softly as he descended. Outside, the night air felt sharper, colder against his face. In the car, he sat for a moment without turning the engine on. Then he reached for his phone. "Cole." "Yes, sir. I need access logs from my office cabinet. 4 years ago." Cross-reference with travel records during my time overseas. A pause. That far back? Yes. And quietly. Understood. Damien ended the call and started the engine. By the time he reached his office, the building was nearly empty. Cleaning staff moved like shadows along the corridors. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead felt sterile. Impersonal, he entered his private office and closed the door. The cabinet stood against the far wall. Matte black. Locked. He unlocked it himself. Inside, neatly stacked, were reams of official correspondence paper, cream-colored, thick stock, subtle watermark pressed diagonally across each sheet. He removed one page and held it up to the light. Identical. He pulled open a drawer and removed a file labeled Supplier Invoices. He flipped back 4 years. There it was. An order placed just before his overseas departure. Large quantity, delivered 3 days before he left. He checked the next invoice. 6 months later, the supplier had discontinued that exact stock. The timing aligned perfectly. He placed the invoice flat on the desk, smoothing it once with his palm. The hum of the building felt louder now. He moved to his computer and opened archived travel records. Departure date, return date, a 3-week window where his physical presence in the city had been non-existent. During that window, someone had signed documents in his name under delegated authority. He opened digital scans of those documents. His signature, replicated by hand. Most of them were legitimate. Minor contracts, routine approvals. He enlarged the scan and zoomed in on the V. Left stroke longer. He leaned back slowly in his chair. The forged letter had reversed it. Not by accident, by miscalculation. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment. The office felt colder now, stripped of familiarity. His assistant had worked for him for 8 years. Efficient, loyal, but limited access. His attorney had no motive, which left one. Marcus Holt, 6 years at his side. 6 years of proximity. 6 years of trust, built through shared danger and calculated decisions. Marcus had managed outgoing correspondence during that overseas trip. He had practiced the signature. He had known Nadia existed. He had known removing her would isolate Damien at a critical moment of territorial consolidation. Damien's jaw tightened, not anger. Disappointment carried sharper edges. He picked up his phone again. Cole, I'm here. Where is Marcus this week? A pause. Chicago until Thursday. Back Friday. Don't tell him, I asked. Another pause. I won't. Damien ended the call and stood. He walked to the window overlooking the city. Traffic below moved in small, glowing threads. People unaware of the quiet fracture forming inside a structure they believed was stable. He placed both hands on the glass. 4 years. He imagined Nadia receiving that letter. Alone. Pregnant. Believing the words were his. He imagined the decision she must have made. To leave. To disappear. To protect a child from consequences she thought he would enforce. The cruelty of it was not in the threat. It was in the credibility. Someone had weaponized his reputation against her. That required access and calculation. He turned away from the window and sat back down. He opened a secure folder on his computer. Internal financial audits. He began cross-referencing accounts under Marcus's oversight. Small discrepancies appeared first. Minor reallocations. Temporary holding accounts that had been justified at the time as strategic shifts. He zoomed in further. Patterns emerged. Transfers routed through shell entities. Timing aligned with internal disruptions. Quiet siphoning masked as operational necessity. Marcus had not only forged a letter, he had been carving space for himself. Damien closed the file. He did not react outwardly. He simply filed the information mentally into a structure that had been built over 20 years. This was no longer personal alone. It was structural. He picked up his jacket and left the office without turning on the lights. The elevator ride down was silent except for the soft whir of cables. His reflection stared back at him in the mirrored walls. Not the man people feared. The man recalculating. Outside, the night had deepened. The city smelled of rain about to fall. He drove without destination at first, then found himself turning toward Garfield Street again. He did not call ahead. He parked and climbed the stairs quietly. The apartment door opened before he knocked. Nadia stood there, as if she had been waiting for the sound of his footsteps. "You found something," she said. "Yes." She stepped aside. Inside, the lamp near the couch cast a warm circle of light. Ava slept curled beneath a blanket, rabbit tucked under her chin. The barrette still clung to her curls by stubborn insistence. Damien kept his voice low. "The paper came from my office during a 3-week window when I was out of the country." Nadia's face tightened. "You're certain?" "Yes." "And the signature?" "Copied." "Incorrectly." She absorbed this slowly. "And the person?" He met her gaze. "I need a little more confirmation." It was not a lie. She studied him for a moment, searching for hesitation. Instead, she saw resolve sharpened into focus. "If it's who you think," she said quietly. "What happens?" He glanced toward the sleeping child. "What happens," he replied, "is correction. Not vengeance. Not spectacle. Correction." Outside, rain began to fall lightly against the window. Inside, in the small apartment with mismatched furniture and carefully taped drawings, the weight of 4 years shifted. The letter was no longer a ghost. It was evidence, and evidence could be dismantled. Damien did not confront Marcus the next morning. He arrived at the office at his usual hour, nodded to the same staff, entered the same glass-walled conference room, and conducted the same scheduled meeting about a shipping contract in Baltimore. His tone did not change. His posture did not shift. He signed 2 documents and rejected a third without raising his voice. Across the table, Marcus Holt watched him with practiced ease. Marcus was composed in the way men become composed after years inside controlled chaos. Clean suit, measured speech, a watch that suggested confidence rather than wealth. He had built his reputation on reliability. Damien observed him the way he observed a ledger, looking for irregularities. Marcus spoke about logistics delays, about a warehouse audit, about an expansion opportunity in Chicago. His voice was steady, his eye contact direct. There was no tremor, no flicker. If he felt anything about the quiet thread tightening around him, he did not show it. After the meeting ended, Damien remained seated. "Marcus," he said mildly, "stay a moment." The others filed out. The glass door shut. The room seemed smaller without witnesses. Marcus leaned back slightly in his chair, relaxed but attentive. "Something wrong?" he asked. Damien folded his hands on the table. "Do you remember the overseas trip 4 years ago? The 3 weeks in Berlin? 12. Marcus did not hesitate. "Of course. You delegated correspondence to me, and I signed documents remotely." "Yes." Damien held his gaze. "You practiced my signature." Marcus allowed a faint smile. "Procedure required consistency." "Yes," Damien said softly. "It did. A beat." "You're reviewing old files?" Marcus asked lightly. "I review everything eventually." Marcus nodded once. "Well, you always said the foundation matters." Damien watched the words land between them. Foundation, trust, structure. He stood slowly. "Good," he said. "We're aligned." Marcus rose as well. There was no visible fracture in the exchange. Not yet. That evening, Damien returned to his office alone. He locked the door and reopened the internal audit files. The financial discrepancies he had skimmed before were now examined line by line. He traced transaction trails backward. One shell company led to another, then another, each layer thin enough to appear routine, thick enough to hide intent. He printed 3 specific transfers and laid them side by side on his desk. The dates corresponded with territorial shifts 4 years ago, the same period Nadia had vanished, the same period Marcus had handled all outgoing correspondence. A pattern. Damien leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes briefly. He did not allow himself anger. Anger-clouded sequence. Instead, he replayed moments from the past 6 years. Marcus stepping forward during a tense negotiation. Marcus volunteering to manage delicate correspondence. Marcus insisting that distractions were liabilities. Liabilities. The word echoed. Damien opened a secure messaging thread. Cole responded almost immediately. "He's clean on surface," Cole wrote. "Nothing obvious. Dig deeper," Damien replied. "Specifically during my Berlin window." There was a pause before Cole answered. "You think it's him?" Damien stared at the screen. "I think he had access." That was all he would say. He rose and walked to the window again. The city lights flickered below, indifferent to the quiet unraveling happening high above. 4 years. He imagined the letter being written in this very building. His letterhead, his cabinet, his signature practiced and reversed by a hand that had shaken his countless times. He felt something colder than anger settle into place. Not rage, finality. The next afternoon, Damien visited Garfield Street again. He knocked softly. Nadia opened the door, expression cautious but no longer closed. Ava sat cross-legged on the floor, with crayons scattered around her. "Big man," she announced, without looking up. He inclined his head. "I have a name," he said to Nadia. She stiffened slightly. He did not say it immediately. Instead, he moved further into the apartment and looked again at the small, deliberate order she had built out of scarcity. The clipped bills, the carefully taped drawings, the repaired chair leg. He turned back to her. Marcus Holt. The name hung in the air. Nadia searched her memory. "I wouldn't know him." "You wouldn't." He kept his voice even. "He had access to my correspondence. He was responsible for all outgoing letters during that trip." Her eyes hardened. "And you trusted him?" "Yes." The admission carried weight. Ava looked up at the change in tone and watched them both. "What happens now?" Nadia asked quietly. Damien met her gaze. "I confirm." "How?" "I let him think nothing has changed." She studied him carefully. "You're not going to—" she began. "No," he interrupted gently. "Not like that." Her shoulders lowered by a fraction. He continued, voice steady. "He forged my signature. He misused company funds. And he weaponized my reputation to isolate you." The refrigerator hummed again, the ordinary sound almost too loud in the small space. "That's not a personal mistake," Damien said. "It's structural corruption." Nadia absorbed the words slowly. "And when you confirm, I correct it." Ava stood and walked over, holding up a crayon drawing. It was a house again. Yellow door. 3 figures this time. She handed it to him without ceremony. Damien took it carefully. He looked at the drawing longer than necessary. Then he crouched to her level. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once, satisfied. Behind her, Nadia watched him. "You're calm," she said. "Yes. That scares me." "It shouldn't." He rose again. "Marcus believes power is leverage," Damien said quietly. "He thinks isolation is control." He glanced at Ava. "He's wrong." Outside, a car passed slowly on the street below. Inside, the name had been spoken. Marcus Holt. It no longer lived in Damien's mind alone. It had entered the room. And once a thing is named, it begins to lose its protection. Sylvia Chen did not look impressed. She sat at Nadia's small kitchen table in a navy suit that belonged in a high-rise conference room, not beside a refrigerator held shut with a rubber band. A legal pad lay open in front of her. Reading glasses rested low on her nose. The loan contract was spread flat beneath her palm. Damien stood near the window, arms folded, saying nothing. Ava colored quietly on the floor with deliberate focus, occasionally glancing up at the unfamiliar woman who spoke in calm, measured sentences. Sylvia turned a page. "This clause," she said evenly, tapping the interest section, "exceeds the state cap by 8.9%. Nadia blinked. "They told me it was standard." Sylvia did not look up. "They say that often." She flipped to the next page. No written disclosure of compounding structure. No secondary validation notice within 5 days of initial contact. That alone is actionable. Damien watched Nadia's face. Not hope, not yet, but confusion giving way to comprehension. Sylvia closed the contract with a soft thud. "The collectors who came to your apartment," she continued, "entered without written validation. They implied legal consequences they cannot enforce. They made physical contact." Nadia's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes, that is at least 4 violations under federal statute." The word statute seemed to land differently than threat ever had. Sylvia slid a folder across the table. Inside were blank forms. "We file a formal debt validation dispute first. Certified mail. Time-stamped. They must produce full documentation proving ownership chain and calculation legitimacy." "And if they can't?" Nadia asked. "They won't," Sylvia replied calmly. She uncapped her pen. "And simultaneously," she added, "we file a complaint with the State Attorney General's office." Damien finally moved, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from Nadia. Sylvia continued as she wrote. "There are 11 prior complaints against this company in the past 2 years. None properly escalated. Yours will be the 12th. Nadia's eyes lifted. 11? At least. Ava paused her coloring. 12 is bigger than 11. She offered helpfully. Sylvia glanced at her and allowed the faintest smile. "Yes," she said. "It is." She turned the legal pad toward Nadia. "Sign here and here." Nadia hesitated only a moment before signing. The scratch of pen against paper sounded louder than it should have. Sylvia stood and retrieved a small portable stamp from her bag. She pressed it firmly against the top right corner of the dispute form. The sound was sharp and final. "Ink bled into fiber. Received 10:34 a.m." She repeated the motion on the complaint form. Another stamp. Another timestamp. Evidence anchored in time. Damien watched each action carefully. This was a different kind of force. Measured. Procedural. Inevitable. Sylvia slid the documents back into the folder. "I'll have these sent certified within the hour," she said. "Return receipts requested." Nadia exhaled slowly, as if a door she had never noticed was finally visible. "I didn't know I could do this," she admitted. "Most people don't," Sylvia replied. "That's the point." She gathered the paperwork efficiently. "Give me 10 days, she added, standing. "The contract itself is structurally unsound." Damien walked her to the door. "Quietly," he said. She met his gaze. Always. The door shut behind her. The apartment felt smaller again, but not as suffocating. Nadia remained seated, staring at the stamped pages left on the table. Ava crawled into her lap, holding up a drawing. It showed a house, a fence, a figure standing outside the fence. "Who's that?" Nadia asked softly. Ava pointed at the figure. "The big man. He stands outside so nobody comes in." Damien heard it from across the room. He did not react outwardly, but the phrase settled somewhere deeper. Later that afternoon, his phone vibrated. "Cole, they've gone quiet," Cole said without preamble. "Meaning?" "The collectors filed a standard follow-up notice this morning, but internal chatter shows concern. They know something's coming." "Good." A pause. "And Marcus?" Cole asked. "He's scheduled to return Friday." "You want me to move?" "No." Damien looked out the window at the thin strip of sky visible between buildings. "Let him feel secure." That evening, Damien returned to his office. He reviewed the financial transfers again, this time correlating them with communication logs. During the same 3-week Berlin window, Marcus had sent 3 internal memos recommending restructuring of certain accounts. The memos were persuasive, reasonable, tactical. Each one had resulted in temporary control shifts. Temporary had become permanent. Damien printed the memos and placed them beside the forged letter copy he had requested Sylvia to scan earlier that day. Paper aligned with paper. Ink aligned with ink. He studied the angle of the V again, the left stroke longer, always. He placed a transparent sheet over both signatures and traced them lightly with a pencil. The discrepancy was subtle, but it existed. Subtle mistakes were the only ones that lasted. His phone vibrated again. "Cole, there's more," Cole said quietly. "Marcus requested an address lookup on Garfield Street 3 days ago." Damien's gaze sharpened. "For what reason?" "Filed under asset assessment." The words carried weight. Damien leaned back slowly in his chair. He could see it now. Marcus testing proximity, measuring exposure, calculating risk. "Keep watching," Damien said, "but do not interfere." "You're sure?" "Yes." He ended the call and stood. He walked once more to the window overlooking the city. Below, headlights moved in patient lines. Inside, something else was moving. Not rage, not vengeance. A narrowing. The procedural filings Sylvia had stamped that morning were already in motion. The lender's confidence would begin to erode under scrutiny. Marcus, meanwhile, believed he still controlled the board. Damien folded the traced signatures and placed them into a new folder labeled simply "Correction." He turned off the office lights. In the dark reflection of the glass, he saw a man who had spent years understanding how power functioned outside the law. Now he was watching how it functioned within it, and somewhere across town, a stamped document was traveling by certified mail. Paper, ink, and time. Sometimes that was all it took to cut deeper than any blade. Cole's name lit up Damien's screen at 7:42 in the morning. Damien was already awake. He had not slept long, but he had not needed to. The folder labeled "Correction" sat closed on his desk. The traced signatures were inside. The certified receipts had been delivered at 8:17 the previous night. He answered before the second ring. "They're moving," Cole said. "No greeting, no excess." "Where?" "Daycare on Clement." 2 men. Not the collectors. Different. Damien was on his feet before the call ended. "How long?" 10 minutes, maybe less. He was in the car in under 2. The engine roared to life. Tires catching pavement with controlled force. Traffic lights blurred into compliance. His hands were steady on the wheel. The city at that hour smelled of wet asphalt and morning coffee drifting from corner shops. Delivery trucks idled at curbs. Parents hurried with backpacks and half-buttoned jackets. Clement Street appeared ahead. A converted ground-floor unit painted in bright cartoon animals. A sun with a smiling face on the brick wall. A short wooden fence separating sidewalk from entrance path. Cole's car was already parked across the street. 2 of Damien's men stood near it, hands in pockets, posture relaxed in a way that meant they were anything but. Half a block down, A sedan idled. Marcus's car. The passenger door opened. Two men stepped out. They moved with intention but not subtlety. One wore a dark jacket too heavy for the weather. The other scanned the street once before starting toward the fence. Damien stepped onto the path. He positioned himself between the gate and the sidewalk. He did not raise his voice. He did not draw attention. He simply stood. The two approaching men slowed. They looked at him, then at Cole, then back at him. The arithmetic recalculated. The sedan's window lowered halfway. Marcus sat inside, composed, watching. Damien met his eyes across the short stretch of pavement. Years of shared history condensed into that glance. Marcus stepped out of the car slowly. He adjusted his cuff, as if preparing for a routine conversation. "You're early," Marcus said casually. Damien did not respond. The morning air felt thinner now. A school bus passed at the end of the block. Brakes hissing. "You're misreading the situation," Marcus continued. "This isn't hostile." "No?" Damien asked evenly. Marcus's smile did not reach his eyes. "Sometimes reminders are necessary." "Reminders of what?" "That isolation protects structure." Damien let the words hang. Behind him, the daycare door opened. A young teacher with a ponytail stepped out, anxiety visible in her rigid posture. She looked from Damien to the men near the fence. "Is everything all right?" she asked, voice tight. Damien did not turn around. "Yes," he said calmly. "Please take the children inside." She hesitated, then nodded, and stepped back through the doorway. For a moment, it might have ended there. Then a small figure appeared behind her, backpack slightly oversized, dark curls uneven where a barrette clung stubbornly to one side. Ava. She stepped just beyond the threshold, peering past the teacher. Her eyes found Damien instantly. The recalibration in her expression was immediate. Recognition, assessment. "Big man," she called clearly. "Are you okay?" The street went quiet. Marcus followed her gaze. Damien felt the full weight of 2 decades of instinct rise in his body. He knew how to end this in seconds. He knew the angle, the distance, the force required. He also knew she was watching. He exhaled slowly. "I'm okay," he answered her. His voice was calm, unforced. "Go back inside with your teacher. I'll be right here." She studied him for a heartbeat longer. Then she nodded once and disappeared inside. The door closed. The latch clicked. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You've changed," he observed. "No," Damien replied. "I've adjusted." Marcus glanced toward his 2 men. They were uncertain now, feet shifting subtly. "You think paperwork saves you?" Marcus asked quietly. Damien reached into his jacket pocket. The movement was slow, deliberate. Marcus's posture tightened instinctively. Damien withdrew his phone. He scrolled once and pressed call. He activated speaker without looking away from Marcus. The faint click of amplification carried between them. "Voss," Damien said. "It's active." A pause on the line. Then a calm male voice responded, crisp and professional. "We're recording." Marcus's expression shifted by a fraction. Damien held the phone slightly higher, screen visible. Call connected. 8:24 a.m. Marcus recovered quickly. "You're escalating," he said lightly. "You already did." Marcus stepped closer to the fence. "She disappears again," he said, voice low but clear enough. "And you go back to being alone." The words settled into the air. On the phone, the same calm voice replied, "Marcus Holt, please repeat that statement." Silence. One of Marcus's men took a half-step backward. Marcus's composure faltered for the first time. "You're recording me?" he demanded. Damien did not blink. "You recorded yourself." Across the street, Cole shifted his stance, watching but not intervening. A distant siren began to wail faintly. Marcus glanced toward the sound. "You think this ends well for you?" he asked. But the certainty had thinned. Damien lowered the phone slightly, but kept the speaker active. "It ends precisely," he said. The siren grew louder. Marcus stepped back toward his sedan. "This isn't over," he muttered. "No," Damien agreed. "It isn't." The sedan door slammed shut. The car pulled away without speed, without screeching tires. Just retreat. Damien remained on the path until the vehicle disappeared at the corner. The daycare door opened again cautiously. Ava peeked out. "You're still here," she observed. "Yes." She smiled faintly, satisfied, and retreated once more. Damien looked down at his phone. The call timer continued to count upward. On the other end, the federal agent's voice spoke again. "We have what we need to move forward." Damien's gaze remained fixed on the empty stretch of street where Marcus had stood. "Then move," he said quietly. He ended the call. The morning resumed around him. Cars passed. A dog barked somewhere nearby. The painted sun on the daycare wall smiled down as if nothing had shifted. But something had. A line had been crossed, and this time it had been crossed on record. The number stayed in Damien's call log. 8:24 a.m. Duration: 6 minutes, 13 seconds. He did not delete it. He forwarded the file within the hour. Encrypted. Time stamped. Chain of custody noted in the subject line. Cole handled the physical transfer of supplementary documents that afternoon. Printed financial discrepancies. Supplier invoices confirming discontinued stock. Archived memos bearing replicated signatures. Each page was logged, each page initialed, each page sealed in a tamper-evident envelope. Damien watched none of it theatrically. He simply ensured it happened correctly. 41 hours. That was the window the federal agent had requested. 41 hours during which Damien behaved as though nothing had shifted. Marcus returned to the office on schedule. He entered Damien's glass office mid-morning, closing the door behind him without invitation. "You've made this complicated," Marcus said, tone restrained but edged. Damien sat behind his desk, hands folded loosely. "You made it complicated 4 years ago." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. "You're risking everything for a woman who left." Damien did not react. "You forged my signature," he said evenly. "You rerouted internal funds. And this week, you attempted to intimidate a child." Marcus stepped closer to the desk. "Careful," he warned quietly. "Accusations without leverage are dangerous." Damien opened a thin folder and slid it across the desk. Inside lay a copy of the supplier invoice. Highlighted, Marcus did not look at it. "Paper stock discontinued 2 years after you used it," Damien said. "Left stroke longer on every authorized signature. Yours reversed." Marcus's eyes flicked downward despite himself. "You're building smoke," he replied. Damien leaned back slightly. "You're already in the fire." The office phone rang, sharp, abrupt. Neither man moved immediately. The second ring was louder in the quiet room. Damien pressed the speaker button. "Voss, Federal Bureau of Investigation," the voice announced calmly. "We have a warrant for Marcus Holt." Silence landed heavily. Marcus did not turn around. His shoulders stiffened. "For what?" he asked, voice controlled. "Financial fraud, conspiracy, obstruction." Damien watched him closely. "We're in the lobby." The voice continued. "Advise your staff to stand down." Marcus's composure cracked at the edges. "You went outside," he said softly, disbelief mixing with anger. "You involved them." "I involved process," Damien replied. There was a knock at the glass door. Not loud, authoritative. Cole opened it without being asked. Two federal agents stepped inside, suits dark, badges displayed briefly, then lowered. "Marcus Holt?" one of them asked. Marcus inhaled once. He looked at Damien. "This is your legacy?" he asked quietly. "No," Damien answered. "This is yours." The agent read the charges in a steady voice. The language was procedural, unemotional. Marcus did not resist when they placed cuffs around his wrists. The metallic click echoed sharply in the office. As they guided him toward the door, Marcus paused. "You think this makes you clean?" he asked. Damien held his gaze. "It makes me correct." Marcus was led out. The glass door closed behind them. The office returned to silence. Through the windows, staff stood frozen in the hallway, whispers already beginning. Damien remained seated for several seconds after the elevator doors closed downstairs. Then, he picked up his phone. "Sylvia." "Yes, he's in custody." "Good," she said simply. The lender's regulatory review was formally opened this morning. Damien stood and walked toward the window. Below, news vans were beginning to arrive. "How extensive?" he asked. 47 contracts under investigation. Same illegal interest structure." He nodded once. "And Nadia? She qualifies for damages." Sylvia replied. "We'll file the civil claim tomorrow." He ended the call. The city outside moved as always. Traffic flowed. Lights changed. People hurried with coffees and briefcases. But inside the structure he had built, a core beam had been removed, and it had not collapsed. It had held. That evening, he drove to Garfield Street without announcement. Nadia opened the door before he knocked. "You heard," she said. "Yes. And?" "He's charged." She studied his face carefully. "You didn't—" she began. "No." Relief flickered across her features. "Will he get out?" she asked. "For now, he answers questions." She nodded slowly. Ava appeared from the living room, rabbit tucked under her arm. "Big man," she said, walking toward him. "You look different." "How?" She tilted her head. "Less sharp." He considered that. "Maybe?" She seemed satisfied with that answer and climbed onto the couch. Nadia moved closer. "And the loan company?" she asked quietly. "Under investigation," he replied. 47 contracts like yours." Her eyes widened. "That many?" "Yes." She sat down slowly. "All this time," she murmured. "I thought it was just me." It wasn't. The refrigerator hummed softly. Outside, rain tapped lightly against the window. Nadia looked at him for a long moment. "You didn't choose violence," she said. "No. You could have." "Yes. Why didn't you?" He glanced toward Ava, who was lining up crayons in careful rows. "Because she was watching." The simplicity of the answer settled between them. Not theatrical, not dramatic, just true. Nadia exhaled slowly. "Then maybe," she said quietly, "this ends differently than it started." Damien did not respond immediately. He looked around the apartment one more time. The clipped bills were still there. The rubber band on the refrigerator handle, the crayon drawings taped carefully to the wall, evidence of 4 years built alone. He stepped closer to the table and rested his hand briefly on its worn surface. "It ends with structure repaired," he said. Outside, a car passed slowly. Inside, the weight that had hung in the room for years felt lighter. Not gone, but moving. 41 hours had shifted everything, and for the first time, the correction was no longer theoretical. It was in motion. The indictment was unsealed on a gray Tuesday morning. Damien read it alone in his office. 32 pages. Structured. Clinical. Dates aligned in columns. Financial trails mapped in clean lines. Transfers traced through shell accounts that once looked invisible under internal reporting thresholds. Now, They were numbered exhibits. He paused on the section outlining conspiracy. Marcus's recorded statement was transcribed verbatim. The words sat on the page, stripped of tone, stripped of posture, stripped of confidence. She disappears again. On paper, it looked smaller than it had sounded on the street, more damning. Damien closed the file and leaned back. The building felt different without Marcus moving through it. Staff had adjusted quickly. Loyalty had shifted in predictable directions. Structures always recalibrated toward stability. Cole entered without knocking. "Board's nervous," he said. "Press is circling." "Let them," Damien replied. Cole hesitated. "There's more." Damien waited. Marcus moved funds again. 3 days before he approached Clement Street. Damien's expression sharpened slightly. "Where?" "A holding account under a dormant subsidiary." 48,000. Damien stood. "Pull full records." Cole nodded and left. Damien moved to the conference room, where the remaining senior staff waited. He did not raise his voice. He projected the financial summary onto the wall. Clean columns, highlighted anomalies, dates corresponding precisely with internal disruptions. "You all see the pattern," he said calmly. No one argued. No one defended Marcus. Fear lingered. But it was not fear of him. It was fear of having missed something. "Operations continue," Damien added. Without him, a murmur of agreement followed. The meeting dissolved quickly. By mid-afternoon, federal agents returned. This time, not for arrest, for documentation. Damien signed additional statements, initialed attachments, confirmed timelines, each action logged, each page stamped. Chain of custody remained intact. That evening, Sylvia called. "The lender has requested settlement," she said, without preamble. "On what terms?" "Debt dissolved. Full refund of payments. Statutory damages. Attorney's fees covered." Damien looked out at the skyline. "And the others?" 46 additional contracts under review. Several will qualify for restitution." He allowed a single breath. "Proceed." He drove to Garfield Street after sunset. The apartment light glowed warm through thin curtains. Nadia opened the door before he reached it. "Come in," she said. No hesitation. Inside, Ava sat at the small table coloring with serious concentration. Nadia watched him carefully. "What happened today?" she asked. "He's been formally indicted," Damien replied. "Additional charges filed. And the company? They're settling. Your debt is void." The word seemed to suspend in the air. Void. Nadia sat slowly in one of the mismatched chairs. "Just like that," she whispered. "Not just," he corrected gently. "Documented." Ava looked up. "Void means gone," she offered. "Yes," Damien said. "Gone." Nadia covered her mouth briefly with her hand. "For 4 years," she said quietly, "I thought I failed." "You were targeted," he replied. She studied him for a long moment. "And you?" she asked. "What does this cost you?" He considered that. "Trust recalibrated," he said. "Nothing. I can't rebuild." She nodded. The refrigerator hummed softly. Outside, a car passed. Ordinary sounds returning to ordinary rhythms. Ava walked over, holding a new drawing. 3 figures again. This time, inside a fence. She placed it on the table between them. "No one gets in," she explained. Damien crouched beside her. "That's the idea." She leaned against him without ceremony. Nadia watched the gesture. "You could have handled this differently," she said quietly. "Yes, and it would have been faster." "Yes. Why didn't you?" He looked at Ava's hand resting against his sleeve. "Because fast isn't always stable." Nadia absorbed that. "You're not the same man," she said. "I am," he replied. "Just adjusted." A faint smile touched her lips. Outside, distant sirens echoed briefly and faded. Inside, something heavier than silence had lifted, not erased, rebalanced. The next morning, headlines ran small but precise. Senior executive charged in financial conspiracy. Predatory lender under investigation. No mention of daycare paths or sideways barrettes. No mention of a child's voice cutting through a street. Damien read none of it. He had other things to attend to. Structures to reinforce. Terms to rewrite. A different kind of presence to maintain. Power that had once relied on intimidation now moved through documentation and restraint. And for the first time in years, correction had not required destruction. It had required exposure. As night fell again, he stood outside the apartment building, a moment longer than necessary before knocking. Not because he was unsure, because he understood now that stability was not something seized. It was something maintained. And this time, it would be. The house on Burwood Street did not announce itself. It sat quietly between two maple trees, paint fresh but understated, porch light warm against the early evening air. The yard was modest, fenced with clean wooden slats spaced close enough that no small body could slip through. The front door was yellow. Damien noticed Nadia notice it. She stood beside him on the sidewalk, arms folded loosely, eyes moving from the door to the yard, to the windows, and back again. "You didn't tell me it was this color," she said. He glanced at the door. "I didn't plan it." Ava pressed her palms against the car window from the back seat. "Is it ours?" she asked. "It can be," Nadia replied carefully. Damien stepped forward and unlocked the door. The hinges made a soft, clean sound as it opened. Inside, the air carried the scent of new paint and wood polish. Afternoon light filtered through uncurtained windows, stretching pale rectangles across hardwood floors. Ava darted in first, backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She ran straight to the back door and pressed her face against the glass. "There's space," she announced. "Yes," Damien said. "There's grass." "Yes." Nadia walked in more slowly, fingers trailing lightly along the wall as if confirming solidity. "You bought this," she said. "Yes, in my name." "Yes." She turned to look at him fully. "No conditions." "None." A long silence followed, not heavy, measured. Ava returned holding a small dandelion she had found near the fence. "It needs a dog," she declared. Damien glanced toward Nadia. "The yard supports that," he said. Nadia exhaled softly, a sound somewhere between disbelief and relief. They moved on a Saturday. There were not many boxes. That fact carried its own quiet weight. Cole arrived in jeans and a plain shirt, carrying 2 chairs. Sylvia followed with coffee and practical instructions about updating mailing addresses. The process was efficient, orderly. By afternoon, crayon drawings had been rehung in the living room at eye level. The mismatched chairs had been replaced. The refrigerator no longer required reinforcement. Ava supervised with solemn authority. "This one goes here," she instructed, tapping the wall where a drawing of a house with a yellow door belonged. Damien adjusted it slightly. "Centered?" he asked. She considered. "Little more left." He complied. Nadia stood in the doorway watching them. There was no visible wall between them anymore. No folded arms. No guarded posture. Just observation. Later that evening, when the others had left and the house had grown quiet, Ava walked across the living room holding one particular drawing, the 3 figures inside a fence. She climbed onto the couch beside Damien without asking permission. "I drew you before," she said, holding up the paper. He studied it. The blocky figure, dark hair, broad shoulders. "You didn't know my name," he said gently. She shook her head. "I called you Daddy in my head." The room stilled. Outside, Wind moved softly through the maple leaves. The fence creaked faintly as it settled. Damien crouched in front of her so their eyes were level. "That's what I am," he said quietly. She studied his face with serious concentration. Then she nodded once, satisfied. Across the room, Nadia had heard everything. She walked toward them slowly and sat down beside them on the couch. No words were required. Weeks passed. The yard gained a small, energetic dog with oversized ears and no understanding of personal space. Ava named him Biscuit after extended deliberation. The house gained routine. Morning light across kitchen tiles, evening shadows along the fence. Laughter echoing differently in rooms designed for it. The civil settlement finalized. Funds transferred. Damages awarded. Other families began receiving notices of restitution. Damien handled his work differently now, not softer, more precise. His office remained structured, his decisions measured, but when he left each evening, he left entirely. On Ava's 4th birthday, streamers in yellow and blue hung across the living room ceiling. A table held food in abundance rather than calculation. Damien baked the cake himself. It leaned slightly to the left. The frosting bore the marks of determined concentration. Ava examined it critically. "It's perfect," she declared. Nadia turned away briefly to compose herself. Later, as the afternoon light slanted golden through the windows, Ava climbed onto the couch beside Damien. Her fingers were sticky with frosting. She cupped his face in both hands and pressed her forehead lightly against his. "You're my daddy," she said with final certainty. "I decided." He felt the statement settle somewhere deep and permanent. "Yes," he replied. Across from them, Nadia watched. There was no fear in her expression now. No calculation. Only recognition. The last of what had once been braced inside her seemed to ease. Outside, the yellow door stood bright against the quiet street. Inside, the structure held, not through intimidation, not through isolation, through presence, through correction, through choosing restraint, when violence would have been easier. Damien looked at the fence visible through the window. It was not a barrier. It was a boundary. And for the first time in a long time, power had chosen to protect rather than control. The house remained still as evening settled. Power finally listened to the people it used to step over.